A quick heads up before we dive in, we have just a handful of places left on our upcoming USA Career Coach accreditation. This is our fully ICF accredited 3-day done-for-you intensive, and I and Zoe will be personally leading the teaching. The dates are the 27th and 28th of October and the 10th of November. You need to be able to attend all three. Now, we're going to be running this live on East Coast time, but if you're a European learner and a bit of a night owl, this could work brilliantly for you too. Now, the last places will go really quickly, so head to thecareerequation.com and drop me a message today to grab yours. See you there. Have you been out of the workforce for a while? Maybe after raising kids, recovering from burnout, taking time to care for someone, facing redundancy, or just needing a break. And now you're thinking about going back and you're unsure where to start. You might be wondering, am I still relevant? What if people judge me for the gap? Have I left it too late? Look, you're not alone and you're not behind. In today's episode, we're talking about what it really takes to return to work after a career break, not just to survive it, but to thrive in your next chapter. And whether you're ready to jump back in or still weighing your options, this conversation will give you the confidence, clarity, and the concrete next steps. Let's reframe the return, not as a comeback to something old, but as a bold step forward into something new.
You'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosner. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the career equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career. Welcome to a special two-part edition of the Career Equation. In this mini-series, we're exploring what it really takes to return to work after time away. Whether you've stepped back to take care for family, perhaps you've been recovering from burnout or navigating illness, or off travelling, or simply pausing and reflecting on what's next. In part one, we're focusing on the mindset of returning. The fears, the hopes, and the emotional weight that can come with stepping back into the world of work. You'll hear why it matters, what people often feel during this phase, and what happens when we return without the right support, versus when we do it well. We'll also share the first practical steps to help you get started, wherever you're at. So, if you're hovering on the edge of your comeback, or you support people who are, this is the episode for you. So let's get into it. Returning isn't about picking up where you left off. It's about moving forward with new insight, new energy, and new intention. So you're not stepping back into like a pair of old shoes. You're stepping into a new pair of shoes, but you're shaped by everything that you've learned and lived through during that breakaway, whether that might be for parenting or caring or healing or grieving, reflection, or just simply taking some time to pause. It isn't a liability, and we really don't want you to see it as that. It's a chapter that's really shaped your values. It's begun to sharpen your instincts, often clarified for you what really matters to you in your life and your work. And also it's important to remember that you may have gained new skills that don't perhaps neatly sit in a CV. Perhaps it's about emotional intelligence or time management or boundary setting or budget management, empathy, perspective. All of those things are new and powerful assets. And when you stop seeing your gap, if you like, as a void and start to see it as a kind of rich part of your story, then everything begins to shift. You're not the same person, that you were before you took the break. And it really is about reflection, perspective, about what's changed for you personally, but also what new insights that you have and how you've grown and what is most important to you now. And I think one thing to remember is that confidence doesn't come from pretending that nothing has happened and trying to kind of pick up where you left off. It comes from integrating what did happen and the narrative that you can really stand in with a sense of pride and ownership, if you like, of that period of change. So returning to work can be an act of redefinition and not necessarily restoration. It's a chance to build a work and life that fits to who you are now and not who you used to be. And that is not just valid, it's incredibly valuable. And interestingly, something that I read only yesterday before I had a coaching chemistry call with a potential new client who'd had a breakthrough to ill health, but is now looking for a next opportunity was this. It said, what if your setback inspires an even bigger comeback? And I shared those words with her and she absolutely loved it and said, oh my gosh, what a way to think about it. And whilst this sounds very inspiring, our hopes and fears around returning to work are really genuine. It's how we are feeling, and those things can have a really significant impact on our ability to move forward. So when we think about fears and hopes, what sort of things do you, Erica, hear when you're chatting with clients?
Yeah, I also have a client who is returning to work at the moment after a career break for having 3 kids and, a huge amount of experience and life change as a result of that. I think one of the things that's really interesting for her is that what was her ideal definition of success before she had children really doesn't work for her now. And that feels quite disorientating, quite disconcerting, and that the ways in which she defined her success by being top of her game in a particular industry, an industry that's very fast paced, very demanding, very long hours, very, very sociable, just feels like a sort of horror story when she thinks about trying to merge that with children. So it's about thinking about which are the bits that I want to take with, which are the components of a fulfilling career or my skill set that still feel relevant and important to me, and which ones actually have shifted quite considerably. And often that's environmental, but it can also be about impact in terms of the priority areas and the ways that you want to manage your life and time. So I think that reconsideration before you return, understanding that you're not the same person that you were back then, really merits the time invested in it. Common fears, common concerns. What are the things that we hear a lot in coaching? I think I've lost my edge, like feeling rusty on the back of taking some time out, doing something different. People have moved on. The industry has moved on without me. It's doing all kinds of new and sexy stuff that I feel like I'm disconnected from. Maybe I won't be taken seriously. Perhaps I've taken a sideways move. I took some time out and I'm worried that I'm going to be judged for that. I'll have to accept less money or status or flexibility, the sense that I'm going to be going backwards. And that's very anxious making. And also just how do I tell the story? How do I explain, rationalize, justify the gap that I've been in? And we always say, when in doubt, be honest. But sometimes that feels really difficult for people to do. So if you take a moment to just think about how many of these feelings and fears that I voiced, we all might have felt at some point for a variety of different reasons. And what if I encouraged you to think about whether those statements are absolutely categorically 100% true? Have I definitely lost my edge? Is it absolutely true that I won't be taken seriously? Because if they aren't, and there's a possibility that there might be an alternative perspective, then we can start to ask ourselves, what might be more useful? What else might be true? And Zoe, we could do a whole other episode on the stories that we tell ourselves and how to challenge our internal thinking. We should do that, actually. But let's just have a look at some of the unspoken hopes. Referring back to what Zoe said at the beginning, what if my best years are still ahead of me? Maybe this time I can do it in a way that really works and is sustainable for me. Perhaps what I'm actually saying is I want a career that fits who I am and my life now. And that's okay to want that. Maybe I'm saying, I hope I'm not alone. I hope I'm not the only person who might be feeling uncomfortable in this particular way. Or maybe it might be possible for me to actually love my work again and to feel really inspired and energized in a new role. Now, if people return to work without support, all kinds of risky things can happen. They do quite often accept jobs that are far below their ability or their needs. I'm working with someone at the moment who I've just suggested that she double the salary that she's looking for and aim for more strategic roles because she was really underselling herself on the back of a year post-redundancy. Sometimes also they burn out really soon, trying to prove themselves too quickly. I know I've been in that situation of being very anxious post-career break that I look like I'm doing a great job and just doing far too much. Sometimes also people stay stuck. They kind of watch others move forward and they feel like they're treading water and find it difficult to keep mobile, to keep learning, to keep growing. And they really internalize that message that the time that I took away was a mistake, that it's unforgivable, that, it's really going to cost me in some way. So if you're listening to this as someone helping people to make a return or hiring someone great who's maybe coming back from a break, just remember that the way in which we support making that happen, if they do return well, will mean all sorts of benefits for both them and us. We will bring fresh clarity and boundary setting about what works for us and doesn't. We can become really powerful role models within an organization about what's possible in terms of taking care of yourself, taking care of others, returning after something really challenging. And I know a lot of people say to me on the back of my injury, it's really inspiring that you're back at work and making it work. They can also reshape what looks like for others. We know that organizations want to get better at helping people return, whatever their reason for leaving, whether it's somebody that you knew before who's coming back, or somebody completely new to you, really thinking about how do we do that well? How do we support people to be successful and to bring all that they can after a break? And how do we help them to unlock a whole new phase of what we call thriving at work? How do you start to think about and plan and organize your return in a way that's really going to support you to have your best years be yet to come?
What if one conversation could unlock your next career move? Whether you're stuck, burnt out, or secretly dreaming of something new, this is your sign. At The Career Equation, we help mid-career professionals figure out what's next and make it happen. So don't keep spinning your wheels. Book a free career clarity call with myself or Zoe at thecareerequation.com and let's map your next move together. If you're a people leader or an HR pro thinking, well, we should be having these conversations in-house, you're right. We'll show you how the Career Equation helps everyone from grads to the C-suite take charge of their development. Head to thecareerequation.com, hit book a call, and let's get started.
CVs of old would have had you in the same connected spaces around this job to this job, and career breaks are much, much more common than ever. Whether that is because you're caregiving for somebody else or your own personal health needed some attention at that time. Maybe you've had redundancy, but you actually want to pause for a moment and think about what's next, or you've been burnt out from a previous role. There's life changes, whatever is happening, they are far more common than they ever were, yet they still sort of have this stigma almost about people coming back and what that actually means. And quite often people are facing then doubt from their employer. Are they really still up to speed? Have they still got what it takes to do this role? Or perhaps they've got doubt in themselves about, am I even relevant? Or I've lost everything I knew before. I don't remember anything. So that kind of gap in confidence begins to grow, doesn't it? If we're not really kind of looking at that break with a different perspective than a loss, looking at it as an opportunity for what have I learned? We can often then find gaps in confidence or in the network. Suddenly I've lost, people have moved on, and suddenly the network I had is not what I thought it was before. And I'm a bit lost in my network and my skills are out of date. And, especially I guess at the moment, if you're coming back into the world of work and AI is this new player in the game and you're like, oh my gosh, definitely haven't got the skills there. So lots of things can come into our thought process around what we're feeling, but what others are perhaps feeling as well. Yet returners bring a whole new fresh perspective. They've got a maturity about them. They're adaptable because they've had to adapt to this period away, and often a new sense of purpose. So helping them to return well is really good for the people, but also for performance for them as individuals, but also for organizations. For many of our clients, this is a real issue. And I reflect back on some time that I spent coaching a number of people facing redundancy in a large organization. And I know that a big factor for many of them was this unknown landscape of an alternative employer or an alternative income idea. That felt really daunting to them. That kind of question of, who am I then if I'm not this person, particularly for those that perhaps been in an organization for what felt like was a lifetime. I'm only what I've ever been in this place. So who am I if I'm not that? But actually, through the process of coaching, for many of them, the sort of agency that they gained from taking control of that situation through redundancy and taking a bit of time to reflect on, what have I got to offer? What do I care deeply about? And where do I want to play in the landscape of what I'd really, truly love to do? If I really had the courage to go wide with my thinking and be creative, what would I love to do? And that often sparked new energy, a new identity, and a real sort of momentum for action. And I think that's something that I noticed, that sort of transition from, oh my gosh, this is happening to me. What on earth am I going to do? I'm lost. I don't know where to begin. To at the back of some really good safe spaces for thinking, to clarity and a new purpose and action that they had control of. What about you, Erica? I'm guessing there's been lots of client things that come to mind for you where they've had transitions to something new after a time away.
Yeah, for sure. And for a variety of different reasons. Redundancy is almost always the best thing that's happened in the end to most of my clients. It really is that they wouldn't have otherwise taken the opportunity, taken the leap. It might have felt too risky. It might have been too big a stretch. Maybe it didn't occur to them that they could choose again. But somehow when life forces their hand, it gives them that opportunity, as you say, to really sort of sit back and choose again, like intentionally and with kind of energy and focus for where they want to spend their time, because that's been forced upon them. And the same with injury, with caring responsibilities, with ill health. There's a quote, it's only once you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. It's like something about the free fall of some of the most challenging things that happen to us that really do force us to think again. You look at the pandemic and how many people revised their view on work and life on the back of that. I think it's a good demonstration. But yeah, so I've recently had a client who was made redundant. They'd taken a year out. They'd been in just one organization for their entire career and probably would have stayed there without some further pushing. But my sense was that in the roles that they'd been in, although they'd had a lot of opportunity, they'd really kind of had their wings clipped and hadn't really been able to harness their potential within the environment they were in. So it was exciting, but it was also really daunting to think about a new place and where they might inhabit, what kind of organization might really suit them. And the chance to choose again isn't always easy, right? Sometimes you have to work on your confidence. Sometimes you have to think about overcoming imposter syndrome. Sometimes you have to really work with that procrastination and anxiety that can make you unwilling to get into action. But in my experience, when people are exercising caution, they're usually exercising a bit too much caution, and that actually they're much more capable than perhaps even their previous culture had allowed them to be, or they themselves are now allowing them to be. I had another client who had a sort of work gap because he lost everything in an entrepreneurial project. He'd built up his career steadily. He was a real expert in his field, and they were just about to become acquired. And then trust came in, actually, and the trustonomics just made the company that was going to acquire them really nervous. And he's had to really climb out of a hole that's been really painful, like emotionally, psychologically, financially, and to really think about what is it that's right for me now. Because some of the opportunities that were coming his way just weren't really in his zone of genius. And I think sometimes when that compromise happens of needing to go back to work because there's a financial imperative, but not necessarily being in your sweet spot, that can be even more demoralizing, because even though you've got the work, you're not in the field that you want to be in. So some of the work that we need to do is just clearing back out for what is it that I'm really designed for? How do I articulate that? How do I tell my story with pride about where I've been and what I've been through and what I've learned through it, and then get myself focused and ready to take on that next opportunity. And I'm really excited to see what that next role is going to look and feel like for him once he's got to the opportunity to really show his best self and get out of being pigeonholed. We can talk a little bit more about these stories perhaps as we go through, but let's talk about how one would get started, I think, in the process of reflecting on a career pivot or a career return. I think for me, the first thing is to really name these fears and needs and anxieties, talking it through with your coach, with a friend, with a colleague, with a mentor, or just with yourself, journaling, to just have a chance to voice some of the anxieties and concerns. And usually my first session with somebody who's coming back after a break is all about that. All the stories that we tell ourselves, all the worries that we have, all the imperatives that are around it, all the anxieties, maybe financially, emotionally, confidence-wise, because the more we can articulate those and get them out, the less they're going to run us. Then I think the next thing is to look at what are the low risk entry points. So are there ways to just dip a toe in the water and see what things can feel like, whether that's reconnecting for a coffee or a drink with a former colleague, whether it's doing a bit freelance hours to just test the waters again, maybe to go to an industry event and just start connecting with people and learning a little bit more about what's out there. And then refreshing your own tools. So updating your LinkedIn, taking a look at your CV, perhaps taking one short online free course to just rebuild your momentum and your ability and appetite and curiosity for learning and growing. Then I think it's really important to know how you tell your story about where you've been. So framing your time away positively in terms of the learning, the values, what it revealed about you, what matters to you now. And also perhaps in that thinking about what you need so that you can articulate that, whether it's returning to a former employer or starting something new, to really just get that sense of the kind of routines and activities that are going to support you to be successful. And a lot of clients talk about feeling rusty, being out of the kind of mechanics, the kind of routines and rituals of work. So thinking about practicing having focused time, reestablishing a schedule, exploring prioritization tools, all of those things can be really useful for just getting back into that rhythm and helping with your identity shift. And last of all, just remember to keep taking action, because confidence comes after action. You might never really feel ready to make the application or to revise the CV or to pitch yourself for a new opportunity. But the more that we give it a go, the more comfortable we become. So that experimenting, reflecting on what we did, then refining what we did and getting better each time. Each individual effort and activity and event feeds into the piggy bank of your confidence and your experience as you start to plan your return.
That's it for part 1 of our Return and Thrive special. We've explored the emotional terrain of coming back to work, the doubts, the hopes, and the importance of seeing your time away not as a gap, but as a powerful chapter that shaped who you are today. In part 2, we go deeper into the how, applying the career equation to help you rebuild with focus and intention. We'll walk through how to reconnect with your skills, passions, the impact you want to have, and the environment where you'll thrive. We'll also share practical strategies, real stories, and insights from both individuals and organisations. So, if today's episode sparks something for you, make sure you join us for part 2, because your next chapter deserves to be designed and not defaulted. So, we'll see you there.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast. Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes.
Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential, enjoying your life, and doing remarkable stuff. And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosna
And Zoe Schofield, signing off.